Alright, so recently I was asked a pretty cool question that I want to address. And it went something like, I want to change, but I can't ever seem to find the motivation to make that change happen. And so I sort of want to touch on that basis. So as you'll see here, I've created this little thing. It's who you are versus who you want to be. So I want to start by asking you a few questions. I watched a few videos that I'm taking pretty much all this information from, and I'll link those videos down below. They're very helpful and they taught me a lot of cool stuff, and I'll link some articles as well. But some of the first questions I'd like to ask you is, how many of you would like to improve their life? And now the second question I'm going to ask is, how many would like to see the people they love improve their life? And the chances are that to both questions, you answered me. So the first thing to keep in mind is this is not just a you problem. Everybody's going through this. Everybody's dealing with this. The very idea of life is to progress. It's why video games are so rewarding. Because for each level up, each new item, each new quest, we can see very clearly that we are progressing forward. The problem with life is it's not so readily apparent when we're making that progress. So because we can't see it nearly as obviously, it almost feels like we're stagnating. Because we're looking for these huge leaps when we should be focusing on the small steps. So one thing I'll tell you right now that's one of the biggest killers as far as change is when you start comparing yourself to others, to this image of who you should be. I believe one of the best, healthiest, and most realistic ways to have a long, healthy life and improve yourself is to be grateful for where you are and excited for where you're going. So you can either be the curse of darkness or you can turn on the light. And the curse of darkness doesn't just affect you. You can spread that like a plague to other people. You infect person after person you get around. And then they go and they infect all of their loved ones. And this sickness spreads. And now you're in an environment that's not productive. It's not good. It's not going to provide the love and attention and carefulness that you need. Because when you're in a shitty environment around shitty people who are all the time being shitty and negative, then you tend to focus on that instead of improving. I mean, how can you improve your life when you don't even have the bare basics together? Something that's really cool that I would recommend that you pull up is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I think you'd find that there's a lot of helpful information on that. It's like you can't exactly focus on ballet or football when you're homeless and you don't know how to feed you or your pets or your children or your loved ones. Football isn't exactly a priority to you at that moment in time, nor is the idea that you want to become better at math or you want to further your education. Right then, you just want to survive. And that's something that you have to really keep in mind. So, what we need to do is we need to surround ourselves in proper environments allows for us to grow. You can't exactly practice meditation in a war zone. It's just not going to work out well for you. So, alternatively, what you need to do is you need to turn on the light. And when I say turn on the light, I mean that you need to be a positive impact on other people. Because you see, when you help others by doing good, you feel good. It helps with the pleasure center of your brain. And that is extremely, incredibly important. It provides usefulness for you. And it lets you know that you're benefiting other people. That builds up your self-esteem, your self-confidence, which will in turn make you more likely to try other things in life. It's the most literal way of feeling and seeing that you're useful, is by helping other people. And then when those people tell you how useful you are and how helpful you're being, you go, yes, thank you. I needed to hear that. You build great friendships that are going to help you. No man is a mountain. No man. No man is an island. We all need to help each other. And I think that's one of... sorry. I apologize. I've had this quite persistent cough ever since I had COVID. And I'm hoping it'll go away with some time. But back to my previous point. This culture of individualism where everything you earn, you have to earn it yourself, is just not realistic. Our very structure of society is set up so everybody is really skilled at certain roles so we can all help each other. From fast food workers to doctors, we all need each other for different reasons. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And yet for many, the very act of asking for help is embarrassing. It's weird because when somebody who's morbidly obese goes to the gym, they're going out of their way to get better. And yet they're made fun of, poked at, people are staring at them. Or other individuals you can find all the time with this toxic gym culture we're currently in, where somebody will be doing an exercise that's slightly different. They're still trying to better themselves. And some jackass whips out their camera and records them making fun of them behind their back. And then uploads it for other jackasses to make fun of them. And that's really unfortunate. Because the idea is that they want to get better. And yet they go out and everybody's staring at them and making fun of them. So they have a fear, and that fear that they have when other people tell them, hey, don't worry, that's not going to happen, and then it does happen, they go, well, I knew it all along. Why'd I even bother? This showed me. Now at least I know. Silly me. Next time I'll know better. And then they don't go back to the gym anymore. Or when a drug addict reaches out for help or asks for a job, it's like, okay, some people will be like, well, why should we pay for, you to get help or your drug treatment, or that's my taxpayer dollars, or blah, 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 blah. It's this general idea that it seems like Americans don't want to help other Americans get better. You have to pull yourself up by the bootstrap. And then we worship this idea of self-made millionaires and billionaires, when that very concept is a myth. From tax breaks to unethical business practices or the exploitation of the grunt labor, there is no person who has made it themselves. Let me state that again. There is no person who has made it themselves. So, with that being said, you need to build a good social circle. You need to be a good group and connection of friends. Because when you help them, they will help you. A way to bring incredible, beautiful life change into someone's life. Truly. And I think that's something that you have to keep in mind. So Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 starts off by saying, let me tell you why you're here. He says that you're here to be salt seasoning, to bring out the flavors of God. Or another way of saying it, you're here to be light, bringing out God's colors. To keep open house and be generous with your lives. And by opening up to others, they'll open up to God. Because see, here's the thing. What they mean by that is that salt makes things better. And light makes things brighter. And you become a catalyst for change. It's this ripple effect of paying it forward. Where one person helps another person. And that person becomes inspired to do good as well. We see in comics all the time with these great people like Superman and Captain America. And yes, they are incredible stories about good men. However, something that gets slept on all the time is the story of the everyday hero, the man who walks a lady across the crosswalk, the guy who puts 11 chicken nuggies into a 10-piece chicken nuggie meal, the guy who opens the door open, someone who tips extra. These are all little things, and yet you are still a hero. You see, you don't have to do incredible things to get incredible results. You're getting it pushed forward. The hardest part for a lot of people when it comes to most things like working out or studying is getting started because of something called activation energy. Motivation is fleeting and it's not going to last for very long. So, what happens to keep consistent with these types of things, if you want to do them, is you have to stop thinking at them. Trust that it will get easier the more you do it. And as you do it, you'll get better at it. And I hope that you can appreciate that. I think that with enough time, people will start to look at life in a different way. But we have to be taught what to do. Nobody throughout school is often taught about how to do their taxes or how to live life or deal with mental health issues. And that's one of the biggest tragedies that I see in myself and in my peers. And I don't want that for people. Because when others do good, I do good. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to change. They're stuck in the mud. Because change is uncomfortable. And here's the deal. Your perspective is going to matter so much. It's going to matter so much because crisis is a detour from that rhythm that you're used to. It takes you right out of it and how you do things. And people love structure. People love consistency. The reason they love it so much, especially for those who grew up in bad households where the parents weren't around, they were getting beat, they didn't know where their next meal was going to come from, because that structure and change is a way of making sense of an otherwise what's been a chaotic life. It allows you to pick up the pieces and sort of put them together. I can't control how I feel. I can't control my family, but I can control what time I have tea. I can control how I dress. I can control how I do my job. And so, when you don't get that sort of structure and schedule and that you need when you're growing up, especially, then you try to grasp for it so hard because it's like, no, please don't go. Don't leave, and you start crawling, crying and screaming and scratching at it, just begging it to stay, because if things change slightly, oh God, what happens? There's a lot of what ifs all the time that people ask when it comes to change, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that. And the biggest thing that I've seen is the what ifs are almost entirely all negative. Almost all the time. And these are important to ask because a little bit of anxiety can be helpful in the sense of you wouldn't want to walk on the edge of a cliff and then be like, oh, and stare down at like, duh. You wouldn't want to do that. You'd want that little bit of fear because you know almost for certain what the answer to that what if is. However, the problem with these what ifs is they go to an almost ridiculous degree. For example, nobody ever asks the positive what ifs. And you're questioning things like you have to know for certain. That's the biggest flaw, is you're not going to know for certain what's going to happen if you try this. But you almost know for certain that what's going on right now you don't like. You're not in love with what's going on right now. In fact, you quite rather dislike it, which is why you're asking so desperately, how can I get better? You don't want to do this anymore. When you were in high school or middle school, let's put it like this, and you wanted to ask out a crush, and you were nervous, and you decided not to ask them out, how did that make you feel? Well, probably made you feel pretty crappy, but also in a weird way relieved, because it took the pressure off of you. Thank God I didn't get embarrassed. Thank God I didn't say no. Not just no, but that I cringed myself out, embarrassed myself, and now all these other numerous things that I was afraid of, they don't have to happen. You see, you guaranteed failure when you decide not to ask them out. But it was familiar failure. It was failure on your terms, and you knew exactly what the outcome was going to be and to what level or degree that your embarrassment or disappointment or bummed out level would be. You knew exactly how it was going to go if you didn't ask anything. The status quo was going to remain the same. Now, you had the equal reward of asking. However, you don't know how they're going to react. Oh, God. There's a multitude of reasons that you don't want to do it. And there's a multitude of ways that they might respond. And for the particularly anxious, none of those sound great. So, the ideas become so very powerful because even as a kid growing up into an adult, you carry this type of doubt with you. And the reason that they're so powerful is because they never properly get challenged. So here's an exercise that I would recommend you guys practice with me to challenge those thoughts. Because people have this fear, this paranoia that the thoughts are just as real as the actions. So I'm going to say something right now. I hope that this roof above me in the next 10 seconds falls down and kills everyone around me. I hope we're all crushed and we die. Me, my cat, my guinea pigs, everything in this room. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010. Nothing happened. And nothing is ever going to happen. If it does happen, it's not because I said something. I can literally say anything. And yet we assign special meaning or values to different things. Almost like we're going to speak into existence that failure. We don't dare say anything, not our fears or our worries or our concerns. Because for some of us, there's this almost OCD-like obsessive degree where we confuse how powerful the words we're using really are. Words have power, but not to the superstitious degree that the roof is now going to collapse on me. It's just not going to happen. And yet, one of the biggest problems is we can recognize that we're being illogical and yet we still continue to do it. So it's not just as simple as don't do it. So a change of mindset can be more important than anything else. You need to enjoy the detour tour. What I mean is, you're seeing things you've never seen before. You're experiencing things you've never experienced. You're getting to do this all in a new, novel way. And this causes growth. So you get to look around and go, wow, this is beautiful. What a great story. I wonder what happens next. Everything that you want or need and don't have is going to be outside of that comfort zone. Because if it was inside your comfort zone, you'd already have it. I want you to let that sit in with you for a moment. Everything you want or need and don't have is outside of your comfort zone. Because if it was inside your comfort zone, you'd already have it. So, now let's get into what are some of the biggest ways that people do change. One of the big ones, right, is when people are hurting so much that they have to. I've had enough. I can't take another minute of this. I've hit rock bottom. Lost my kids. My wife hates me. I'm jobless. I have nothing left. Sometimes, unfortunately, that's what it takes for some people. And you see this especially with drug addiction. Because for them, it feels more important than stuff like food or water. So you try to save them and you end up enabling them and you drag out this process longer than it needs to be. Sometimes you just have to let them go and you have to love them from afar in those moments. And you have to be like, look, I love you. I will not bastardize the relationship and the sanctity of our kinship. And this hurts so much that I am willing to put aside blood ties. And by no means do I want you to downplay the severity of what I just said and the actions I am taking. Because until you come back in a better version of you, there will be no me. I cannot participate in that. And that's the thing, is that there's all these sweet little lies and things that they'll say. Try to convince you that I have changed or I won't do it again. This is the last time. And they want to mean it. They want to mean it so bad. They want to mean it so bad. This is the last time, I swear it. You ever seen somebody who has a panic attack on any drug or like just a bad trip and they go, God, if you save me, if you don't let this happen, if you take me out of this, I'll never do it again. Sometimes it takes multiple times for that. But let me tell you, when you pull them out and you don't let them experience those moments, they're going to continue to do it. And it might be too late one time. You cannot save them. You cannot be mother hen. They are a fucking adult. Even as a kid, it's kind of tough. But especially when they're an adult, you can't always be there for them. It's just not realistic. They have to be able to be independent. So you're keeping them on. You're essentially breastfeeding them past the age that they were supposed to quit. You're supposed to wean them off. So here's an exercise that I want you guys to try to practice right now with me. I want you to cross your arms. Now, are you doing it the same way every time? Chances are you are. If I ask you to cross your arms 3 times before I mention that, you're going to cross your arms the same way every time. Until I mention it, you're not going to cross your arms a different way. The fact is you crossed your arms in a specific way without even thinking about it. But now that I mention it, chances are that you're thinking of crossing your arms a different way if you haven't already. But that thought would never come in mind until I said something. So, let me go on to the next point. And this is that people change when they have enough to change, which is back to the environment thing. So I don't need to touch on this one too much, but this is again back to you need to have your basic needs, which is why it's important to advocate for resources for the homeless, for those who are in financial poverty. You can't get better if you can't even survive. So make sure that when you're looking for somebody, you want to judge someone else. You ask if they even have the resources that would allow them to change. And if they don't, how can you help them? So on to that next point. It's when you're inspired enough that you want to receive that knowledge. This is again back to the everyday heroes. They pass it forward because they saw that you did it, and they themselves go, I want to be like that guy. Be a role model for those people. You are a role model. You are an inspiration to at least one person in your life. And they're watching you carefully to see what you do. So make sure that you're doing the right thing. So here's the issue, right? Between all this advice I'm offering you, here's the biggest issue with that. Is that you might not even trust me. There's been a sharp decline in trust recently. So in 1964, about 77% of Americans trusted their government. However, in 1994, only about 20%. Now, there is some good reason for this. When you end up with shit like Project MKUltra, which was when people were being drugged unknowingly with psychedelics. Or you look at how history has been written by the victors, and often in schools, the United States glorifies all the things that it did right, or that it plays up things as if they were the right thing to do. But on the other hand, when it comes to the negatives, just completely brushes them under the rug. Let's not even mention them. So there is definitely some reason to be hesitant. Also because you just don't want to get taken advantage of and be gullible and a fool. You don't just trust anybody, right? They have to earn that trust, and that makes sense. Same way if somebody calls you and they say, oh yeah, I work for blah 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 blah, you owe me $10,000. You wouldn't just go, oh yeah, and if you did, you get fucked. So there's definitely some reason. However, this has led to the other extreme, right? Where instead of trusting everybody, we want to be able to be reasonable, right? We don't want to pick one or the other extreme. Because in this example, I'm talking about the extreme of, I just don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody. All they're going to do is hurt me. And so I'm going to build up these walls. And then people are going to stop trying. And eventually I'm going to feel so lonely. And I'm going to be like, where is everybody? But the truth is that I never let anybody in. And they just decided, hey, this is just not worth it. I've been trying to get into this castle for a while now. Can't find any door entrance. So there must not be one. I guess I'll go look elsewhere. In 1994, only 20% of Americans said that they trust the government. But it's also to what degree. Studies like that, they need to be a little more nuanced. They need to ask to what degree, and if they had any reasons that they want it. In 2014, 70% of Americans said that most people can't be trusted. And the question becomes, why is this? Well, one of the biggest reasons is that we've had a loss of values. And so, as a result, trust falls. So, there's this thing, the trust factor, with social trust. That we believe people do what they ought to do most of the time. But the problem is, where do we get that ought? We get that ought by learning and living good values. We see other people do good. We see other people provide an example for us on what we should do. And by getting those positive examples, we in turn will become a positive person. It can equally be said that if we grow up and we have shitty parents, like unfortunately a lot of children who grow up with abusive parents will then model that abusive behavior themselves. There was this really haunting experiment called the Boba doll experiment, in which children were essentially conditioned to become very violent towards the doll. People can absolutely be trained to do bad things. You look at all the brainwashing experiments that have been done by militaries, and you learn really quickly that you can make a normal man into a monster. So we learn from the people around us and from our environment on how we ought to be. Unfortunately, this can end really evilly. It used to be that we ought to own slave, right? When people say common sense, I hate that argument. Because again, it used to be common sense to have a slave. So we have to be able to critically think for ourselves. You cannot just go, okay, that makes sense. You have to understand why that makes sense. You should always be open to the idea that you can be proven wrong, that you don't know everything definitively. What I like to say whenever I'm having a conversation with somebody and we're trying to come to the truth and we're trying to better ourselves and come to a general understanding is, I'll say what I believe to be the truth, and I'd like you to correct me where you feel I was wrong. Keeps things civil, and if I show that I'm more open, then they'll show that they'll be more open in turn. People appreciate those little things.